The song tells us that he is both amazing and fantastic, and yet somehow he's not so amazing as to avoid capture and to have lost his eye. And I really want to see that episode. I really want to see the episode of Danger Mouse where he has his eye burnt or scooped out. I want to know what happened to that eye. Maybe he got attacked by a cat like Nick Fury in the Marvel films. Come on, Cosgrove Studios, give us the prequel where he gets his eye pulled out. That's what we all want to see, the gross torture of a children's character. Maybe we don't need to. Maybe it's in one of these 3 games. Let's have a look, shall we, at the trio of ZX Spectrum computer games based on Danger Mouse, those being Double Trouble, Black Forest Chateau and Making Whoopee. Oh, matron. Before we point Iris at VJo game though, let us have the goosiest of ganders at its forefather, the wonderful animated series Danger Mouse. Danger Mouse was a 1980s animated series produced by Cosgrove Hall for Thames Television. It was a spoof of Patrick McGoohan TV show Danger Man, a 60s series about a secret agent called John Drake. There's obviously nods to James Bond too, I'm not going to discount those, but its original inspiration was Danger Man. Originally, Danger Mouse was going to be a touch more serious in tone, something which can be seen in the pilot episode. Then, theme writer Mike Harding pointed out the absolute nonsense that the concept of a cartoon about a James Bond mouse was, and so it helped creators Mark Hill and Brian Cosgrove to change the show to suit its more ridiculous premise. Comedy actors David Jason and Terry Scott were brought in to play the eponymous hero and his hapless coward assistant Penfold, and a wonderfully strange pan-generational animated classic was born. Running for 89 episodes for 11 years, Danger Mouse also spawned the equally brilliant Count Duckula spin-off show. That show, of course, had a couple of games made about it too. One I've already reviewed and was fine, and one I will review. And it's going to take a day of high courage and low self-esteem for me to cover that. There are many horrors ahead in this series still, don't you worry about that. Danger Mouse had a revival series in the 2010s, voiced by Alexander Armstrong and Kevin Eldon. It was pretty good too. Moving on to this particular show's games, Danger Mouse in the Black Forest Chateau, Danger Mouse in Double Trouble and Danger Mouse in Making Whoopee were published in 1985 and 1984 by Creative Sparks. Creative Sparks were a small software house around for the first few years of the 8-bit system's existence, and they issued the 3 titles for the mid-price of $6.95 for the first 2 and $1.99 for Making Whoopee, the last game that they released in the Danger Mouse series. When Creative Sparks folded in 1987, Alternative Software bought all 3 pieces of software and re-released them under their label. In a similar vein to our previous episode, Adrian Mole, the first Danger Mouse game was an interactive fiction title, which is basically a text adventure where you don't have to come up with the instructions as the options come up on the screen and you have to select which one you want to do. The plotline has Jeff from Biker Grove facial head Spy Supremo and bald chinchilla apparently, Colonel K sending Penfold and DM to the Black Forest to deactivate the Pi Beam, the latest planet-threatening weapon utilised by the villainous Baron Silas Greenback. Look at him. As an entry-level text adventure, I think the Black Forest Chateau is pretty good. The multiple choice answers make it easier for beginners than stumbling through whatever words that the Spectrum has in its lexicon, and the still graphics are pretty well drawn, which is far from the usual with titles of this nature. If you can learn the world and pick up the right objects, you can move through the game pretty effectively. It's far from a punishing title, and its simplicity in this case is a boon for me, who is already dreading playing the text adventure likes of Dallas and Robin of Sherwood, almost as much as I didn't like playing the Masters of the Universe text adventure game. Penfold will occasionally drop a clue or two, and the dialogue is written in such a way as to quietly nudge you in the correct direction. It's a quick loader in terms of its locations and graphics, and the game is split into 2 bite-sized parts as you try and get a code that unlocks the second part of the game. A welcoming, if slightly easier than normal adventure, and one that Sinclair user rated an 8 out of 10, saying it's ideal for young adventurers and an enjoyable break for the seasonal adventurers not wishing to expend much brain power. Released in the same year as Black Forest Chateau was Double Trouble. This time we've got an arcade-style effort split into 3 parts. The pie-eating, wheezing, froggy kingpin himself, Greenback, is already up to no good because he's a bad guy and they get up to no good as a matter of point, hence the name Bad Guy. It could mean great peril for the world if Silas activates his sinister android clone, of course, that being a robot version of our hero, Danger Mouse. Your first mission has Danger Mouse and Penfold in the red upholstery of the yellow aero car as they travel to the jungle base of the well-dressed criminal amphibian. The troublesome Toad is not a fan of this incursion, so he has dispatched a lot of anti-mouse robots at the postbox dwelling pair. These can be taken down by using a musical weapon, but you will need to choose which robot to blast on the harder difficulty levels with a particular note for each one. On the easier setting, it's a bit immaterial. It will blast for you, and so sort of ruins the whole point of the level. But you know what, I'm down for that. When you've flown far enough into the jungle, you will land, and here you'll have to hare it through the rainforest, leaping crocodiles and clambering up tree bark to avoid the attentions of monkeys and mouse-eating pumas. This bit controls reasonably well, I suppose. It's nothing to write home about, but it's a fairly non-offensive, fairly playable platform section. If you get through the greenery, it's into the lab of Greenback, where he and his assistant Stiletto the Crow are attempting to animate the robot doppelganger of London's most daring vermin. Here we're in a very visually pleasing, characterful puzzle game scenario, as Greenback and Mouse have to compete to activate lights in their colour. It sort of works a bit like drafts in the fact that you draw lines with the lights, and you have to obviously get the majority of the lights to win. I think it's a bit like drafts. I don't really play drafts, so I don't really know. The Penfold and Nero animation is quite funny though, as Nero chases Penfold through the factory. It's nice that they've tried to do something a bit different with the license rather than a pure platformer, and variety is the spice of life. And spice is good at this stage of my life, because to taste spice is to have a burning sensation in my mouth and therefore feel something. Yeah. Double Trouble is good to very good for DM fans, but perhaps less interesting to general arcade fans, say Crash magazine in their November 1984 edition, and they gave it a 75% overall. The February 1985 Your Sinclair precursor Your Spectrum gave it a 4 out of 5, saying that the graphics are superb and that there are lots of nice touches that mark this as a very well thought out game. Sinclair user said the following in their December 1984 issue, coupled with an 8 out of 10. This game should keep any ageing youngster entertained for hours, and that the only danger is that the real youngsters might not get a look in. The third and final part of Creative Spark's Danger Mouse trilogy, because if it's the third part, it's obviously going to be the final part of a trilogy. Do you know how trilogies work? Is making Whoopee. The saucy title derives from the bulbous Baron's latest scheme to manufacture enough whoopee cushions to hide on the chairs of every seat in the United Nations Council. At the next summit, bottoms will meet rubber, air will noisily expel like the shout of a charging turd from a rump piece, and everyone in that meeting will have to apologise in every language possible. This will obviously be immensely time-consuming with all the different languages, and so will leave the path clear for the fiendish frog to dominate the world. In essence, with this plot, Creative Sparks have shown that they completely understand the sense of humour of the animated version of Danger Mouse, and hats off to them, that is a great plot. There's no Penfold with you this time, as Greenback has kidnapped the Greg Wallace in Boris Johnson suit lookalike urchin, so DM will have to do this one all alone. The objective is to shut down enough Whoopee factories dotted around the city to prevent the dastardly plan from taking shape. We're back in the aero car for this as we drive around a city, with the top screen representing a three-dimensional mouse car perspective and the bottom half showing the city layout itself. The green crosses represent trolls who have special requirements for items before letting you past. A dead end will usually incorporate a doorway. That doorway will lead you onto a platform section, and by manoeuvring DM through a maze of doors and jumping a lot of different obstacles that are usually bubbles, you can get to the right door, and behind that door you should be able to find an object that will let you progress past the trolls. So yes, that's the conceit of the game. You've got to do all this, by the way, before Silas Greenback makes his full arsenal of guff sounders, though, so you're under a bit of a time limit. Out of the three titles, I think this is probably the weakest. The car manoeuvring makes sense on paper, but is an absolute mess in practice. And as it's 75% of the game, you should probably get your Del Boy voiced mouse fun from one of the other titles in this list. I'm not a fan of this one, it must be said, although I did like the plot line. Crash said it wasn't a bad piece of cheapo software. It would be nice if it was just a little bit more compelling. They gave it 56% in their September 1986 issue. Your Sinclair, though, they really liked it actually, and thought a 8 out of 10 was a fair score in their October 1986 edition. They called it a right little cracker that deserves to bubble right to the top of the charts, because it's got bubbles in it, you see. CNVG gave it the once over in November 1986. They reckoned that the graphics are average, the sound the same, and the gameplay is basically frustrating. Nice idea, shame about the game. Yeah, I'm with them. A mixed bag then from the United Kingdom's most heroic cheese-nibbling rodent. The next episode? Well, we're right in the middle of the European Football Championships at this point, aren't we? So how about a bit of BBC's Match of the Day? Scorchio. Like, subscribe, and K thanks, bye.